Hi everyone. So we're going to talk about the transitions from fossil fuels to electric vehicles and dispel some of the myths and all those little things that people don't really talk about that doesn't make a lot of sense but should be discussed anyways. So over the next about 10 years, the transition over to electric vehicles, it's going to be a big thing. Charging stations, at-home charging, switching to a less utilization of fossil fuels and hopefully to renewable energies. So electric vehicles, battery-powered vehicles, whatever you want to call them, they're great. They overall produce less of a carbon footprint. So the biggest carbon footprint that occurs with an electric vehicle is in the manufacture of an electric vehicle. The greatest footprint is kind of like with a combustion vehicle is a half and half. At first, it is a lot of carbon footprint that comes with building the gasoline powered car, and then the longer you drive a gasoline powered car, the more carbon footprint it produces overall. So let's just say, and I'll use as an example, is if you buy a truck. Yes, these trucks don't get very good gas mileage, so by the time you reach about 120,000 miles in a truck, maybe about 7-8 years down the road, even, the reality is a truck's burning of fossil fuels will overtake the carbon footprint of the manufacturer of the car itself. When you look at an electric vehicle, the main problem is always going to be the manufacturer of that electric vehicle. That's going to be the biggest carbon footprint. Afterwards, the use of recharging, the electricity that you use to recharge will determine the carbon footprint. So if it's dirty coal, then yeah, you're going to have a large carbon footprint. If it's renewable energy like solar power, then there's a very, very small footprint over time. So what does that mean when you look at the manufacturing side of an electric vehicle? As of right now, it's in its early stages of manufacture. So yes, there's a larger carbon footprint, but as technologies improve, efficiency improve, the carbon footprint will decrease per car when it comes to the carbon footprint of a car. Within the next about 3 to 5 years, 2025, the carbon footprint of the manufacture of an electric vehicle will decrease quite a bit, mainly because the idea is to produce more. As you do volume production, efficiency improves. One of the issues with electric vehicles is the manufacture of batteries, which has a fairly significant carbon footprint to it. That will get better as the technologies, the efficiencies to produce batteries improves. And that just takes time because, once again, until something becomes popular, people are not receptive to it, they don't buy it, so as more people buys it, it gets more and more efficient to produce. Why? Because that improves margins for companies, and companies always want to have better margins overall, or even as their margins improve, they decrease the cost of a product, which means they can sell it to a larger population. So there's always a benefit for efficiency. So as electric cars become more and more prevalent, they will improve in the efficiency of production, which the carbon footprint will go down. At the same time, what we're looking at as a overall human global transition from fossil fuels as well to produce large-scale energy systems to more renewable windmills, solar power plants, molten salt systems, and once again, recharging batteries for when to harness these excesses so that they utilize renewable energies. Well, in the long term, as you utilize renewable energies, the carbon footprint of the electricity to recharge the electric vehicles will also go down. So there's always a benefit of it. You know, at some point, fossil fuels, coal plants will not be utilized as much. So dirty electricity, in a sense, will decrease. Well, there's always, people say, hey, what about the carbon footprint for producing windmills and producing solar powered plants and batteries and all that stuff? Yes, there's always a carbon footprint up front, but the systems are beginning to be more resilient. The technologies are lasting longer. So solar panels, they're lasting 20, 25 years. Windmills, they are lasting long enough where they offset the carbon footprint. And even batteries, storage systems, they're more efficient nowadays, which means they'll last longer, which means they'll offset their carbon footprint better per energy storage. So that gets better. The other side of the coin is, when you look at an electric vehicle, yes, it's said that realistically, there's not many people in this world that needs an electric vehicle that travels more than 150, 200 miles. So yes, you don't need really large battery systems in electric vehicles. There's a good side to this. So let's just say a car that can utilize a battery system that gets 240 miles per charge versus a battery that gets 300 miles per charge. So 60 miles worth of charge that is unnecessary for a 240 mile car means what? Less battery in that car, less weight, which means improved efficiency. Improved efficiency means what? That means per charge, per kilowatt, you get more range as well too, which is nice because as efficiency improves, the cost per mile, the cost per drive, the cost per distance decreases, which overall improves, what do you look at? The overall effect of renewable energies. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? It's how you have to look at it. So the other side of the coin you have to look at is when you say, hey, I'm going to buy a car that has 240 miles worth of range. Once again, you look at electric vehicles nowadays and the batteries that are utilized, that are manufactured to produce these electric vehicles. Well, lithium is still the biggest proponent. On the most part, do you want to charge it to 100% every single time? No. Do you want to drop below 20% of its charge at any given time? No. So you do have a 30% charge, a 30% leeway that you cannot utilize. So for 240 miles, if you take away 30%, you take away about 65 miles of this car. So that 240 mile car is actually closer to about 175 miles worth of efficient range. Can you do the 240 miles fully? Yes. Yes, you can. You can absolutely do that. Lithium ions, if you look at a per cycle, on average between 500 to 1,000 charges before the wear on these batteries are so great that they become, first off, more dangerous, and second of all, the ranges are so decreased so much, even the charging becomes less efficient, so they start becoming not usable for the electric world. So what does that mean? Realistically, first off, if you get an electric car, do you charge your car every single day? Is it necessary? Actually, it's not. If you look at your internal combustion engine cars, your typical cars that use gasoline nowadays, you don't go to the gas station every single day and fill up and top off your tank every single day. It's not necessary. If you continuously do that in an electric vehicle, will it cause it to degrade faster over time? Yes, absolutely it will. That's just how batteries work nowadays. Realistically, let's just say you have a 240 mile range on your car and only charge it once a week. Is that manageable? Yes. Will it cause your battery life to last longer overall? Yes, it will. So the one key thing is, if you have an electric car, electric vehicle, whatever you want to call it, is don't charge it and top it off every single day. I know the science, some people say, yeah, go ahead and do that. The realistic side is, Once you get to about 90% of the charge, you really need to go ahead and not charge it anymore, and don't top it off every single day. Let it run down to maybe even 40%, 35% before you charge again. That's your typical driver. That's literally 85, 90% of the world. That's how most people drive, roughly about 30, 40 miles a day at any given time. Well, here's the thing about it is that you have 175 miles worth of range in it. Overall, to be efficient, you can go 3 or 4 days before you have to charge again. And those cycles or so allow the battery to stay within a comfortable range, so it decreases the overall degradation. Charging to 100% every so often when you go on long trips, is that worthy? Yes. Is it, if you want to utilize 100% of the charge, so drop it all the way down below 20%, can you do that? Absolutely. But if you do that all the time, is it good for the battery? Actually, it's not. It degrades the battery faster. So when you look at buying an electric vehicle, can you deal with a vehicle that gets 240 or 300 miles worth of range? You could, but that also means you have to charge it more frequently. Charging more frequently, or charging more full more frequently, it will decrease the longevity of the battery, which is the biggest thing about electric vehicles. When it comes to transitioning over to an electric vehicle at any particular time, what do people need to do? The realistic side of it is the most efficient way of managing an electric vehicle over time is to, first off, try to purchase an electric vehicle with the most amount of range that you can afford. So is a 300-mile battery versus a 500-mile battery any better? The 500-mile battery is better because you'll have to charge it less. If you top it off every single day versus a 240-mile battery every single day, are you going to degrade that 500-mile battery just as much, just the same as you would a 240-mile battery? Yes. So doing that is not necessarily the best thing to do for a battery, regardless of what the range is. The difference is, if you have a 500-mile battery, your degradation or so, it's going to be the same overall, but you'll still have better range. Now, if you look at it from the other retrospect is, say you have a 240-mile battery versus a 500-mile battery. Well, if you charge it to 90%, first off, yes, you do have better range for a 500-mile battery, because your 500-mile battery means what? You'll have about 450 miles if you charge it to 90%. Which means that's almost double, almost 2.5 times more range that you're going to get than the 240-mile battery, which means as well too is maybe you don't have to charge it every 4 or 5 days. Maybe you can wait every 14 days to charge it, every 2 weeks to charge it instead, unless you plan on going on long trips. What does that mean? That will increase the longevity of a battery. Like I said, still you don't want to drop below 20% like any other thing, but overall you still have better range overall before you have to charge it again, which is a very, very good thing. So if you charge it every 2 weeks, and let's just say a life cycle of that battery system is 500 cycles. Well, if it's every 2 weeks or so, how many cycles do you use up in a 10-year period of time? It will last you the full 10 years without degrading so bad. Will it last longer? Sure, it might last longer. It just depends upon how efficient you are with your driving, how well you manage the battery system on it, and how well the technologies to manage the battery systems on it are. Weather conditions permitting, so if you are in environments that are extremely hot, where your batteries overheat easily or run at higher temperatures, will it benefit your battery? No. If you run it too cold or so, will it benefit your battery? Not really. So it's about having these ideals, and some of these battery systems, they do have heating and cooling elements inside to try to keep the temperatures of the battery at an efficient range that are ideal for battery utilization. But once again, that uses electricity as well too. So you have to take these things into account. So when it comes to looking at electric vehicles right now, do you really want a cheap electric vehicle that utilizes, more power per mile versus something that's a little bit more efficient, take the one that is the most efficient with the price point that you can afford. So it's first off, efficiency is very important, but also look at the at the at the total distance that you can go per charge as well too, because that matters. The more you have to charge it, the faster the battery will degrade. The more frequently you charge a battery, the faster the battery will degrade. So, like, I'll use an example. Do I put my phone on the charger every single day? Absolutely not. It uses a lithium-ion battery. Do I have my phone charge my battery to 100% every day? Absolutely not. My phone, I have it to charge my battery at a maximum of 80%. Why? Because I don't use my phone that much. So every single day, it might go from 80% to about 50%, which means what? I only use 30% of my battery. If I only use 30% of my battery, and the next day I expect roughly about the same, then I can go from 50% to 20% and not really cause any major fluctuations in my battery. So my battery on my phone will last longer. So my phone's battery system is designed to only charge to 80%, and once in a while for maintenance purposes does it ever go ahead and charge to 100%, just because it's the battery technology itself, it's the maintenance on the battery. But realistically, I always have it set to charge to 80%. Now, when it comes to my battery on my phone, do I choose a phone at that time when I bought my phone with the most amount of battery power, or in a sense the most amount of power that battery can hold at that time? Absolutely. Why? Because if I do that on a constant basis, I never have to charge my phone to the fullest, and I will never run it down to the point where it's below 20%, 25%, which starts making charging degrade batteries, making battery function decrease and more inefficient over time. So 95 to 98% of the time, the battery, even on my phone, stays between about 30% charge to about 80% charge. It never goes above and below that, my utilization. And this is something that I look at is, how do I utilize my phone? Well, the same thing with cars or so, internal combustion engines. I don't go to the gas station every day. My car gets about 50 miles to the gallon. So my basic driving or so says about once every 2 weeks to 2.5 weeks, well, I have to fill up my tank with gas. Well, same thing for an electric vehicle is, if I have an electric vehicle that gets roughly about 500, 600 miles to the charge, what does that mean? About 2 weeks or so that I would be able to drive an electric vehicle without having to charge my vehicle. Yes, charging is slow, but if you're doing it while you're asleep, you don't really need really, really fast charging. The only time you need it is if you're going to be on a long road trip, which nowadays with our environment, that's not the biggest concern. At some point, the world's going to open up better, and I'm going to be able to take trips around the States or wherever it is more frequently. Am I going to be concerned at that point? A little bit more, but hopefully within the next couple of years, as technologies improve, charging stations are built a little bit more broadly and spread out across the world a little bit better. If I need to top off, I can stop somewhere for 10 or 15 minutes, and 10 or 15 minutes worth of charge at most places will get you about 100 miles, 150 miles, somewhere around there, which is great, which means, let's just say I have that 500-mile electric vehicle. If I go somewhere, it spends 200, 250 miles to get there. Well, 10 or 15 minutes is going to give me 100 miles, maybe 150 miles of it back. Do I need the full 250 miles to get back home? No, because I only went 250 miles to get there. Technically, I don't really need to charge it again until I get home, but topping it off to, another 100 miles or so just to be on the safe side is not going to degrade the battery. It's not going to bring the charge back up past 85-90% of the battery, and it's going to keep it just in case I don't want to charge it the rest of the time I'm on my trip, drive around the city or so, or whatever it is, still be able to go home and still maintain a good level of charge so my battery doesn't degrade. And overall, that's what I would do in my current car. Is I would fill up my car before I leave. Let's just say I drive 200, 210 miles, 250 miles to wherever it is I'm going. Most of the time, I don't fill up my tank again. I just go ahead and do whatever it is I want to do around the area, and then I drive back, and then when I drive back, then I'll fill up my tank again. Why can't you do that in an electric vehicle? No, it's just a psychology thing. Get past the human psychology that fears driving range. Well, most cars nowadays will tell you, based upon your driving habits, what range you'll have overall. Well, if you look at your charging and all that, it says, hey, if you want to drive this to the maximum, you're going to be able to drive 180 miles per hour. And yes, even after you drive 180 miles an hour, there's always a 3 to 5 mile leeway, just in case. And similar to gas tanks, they do the exact same thing. They say empty on the gas tank, but surprisingly enough, you drive another 20 miles, 15 to 20 miles before you completely run out of gas. Well, electric systems, they have that leftover, that emergency amount of battery left over. Why? So people don't do something really dumb, as in utilize all 180 miles and not have charged it or gotten to a charging station, and that'll give them another 5 miles or 6 miles to get to a charging station safely. Hopefully in the next few years you'll see more charging stations available. Tough luck if it's a slower charging station. At least you can get to a charging station, which is very, very nice, which means you might be able to take a break a little longer and think about what caused that particular situation, which might be a necessity nowadays. But that's the key thing about looking at efficiency with electric vehicles as people transition from internal combustion. Yes, you have gas stations everywhere. At some point, the transition over to electric vehicles means you'll have charging stations everywhere. But this is in its young, early stages as well too. So it takes time to build out these systems. Similar to gas stations, it took generations, a couple of generations, actually several generations, to build as many gas stations and make it as efficient as it is nowadays. Well, we've been through 1.5 generations of electric vehicles, and it's built out, and it's actually pretty efficient. So as more electric vehicles are being produced, more charging stations are being utilized, which also is a nice situation for electric vehicles, is that every house is also a charging station as well, because you can use the electricity from the grid. You can connect your car to an outlet at anybody's house who pretty much has electricity nowadays. So you look at the charging stations for electric vehicles is already mature. We just need ones that allow us to travel a little bit better, and that's it. So we have 100 million gas station or charging stations in the US. We just need travel chargers along the way in between those homes, in a sense. Now, I'm not saying go to a stranger's house and say, hey, could I borrow your outlet or anything like that? But the reality is every home who buys an electric vehicle, they already have a charging station. They, in a sense, have a gas station at home, a charging station at home for their car. They can charge that, which even if it's the slowest 120 volt system, it'll still charge your car. It takes 2 days to go from 0 to 100%. But most of the time, you're not going from 0 to 100%. Like I said, if you charge at 25%, 30%, and you only go up to 90%, what's the problem? Everybody's like, oh, it takes 2 days to charge the car. Yes, but there's realistically not many people that are going to drive their car all the way down to 0 before they charge their car, similar to gas-powered cars. When it gets to just about time to fill up, you have 2 or 3 gallons in your tank, and you fill it up to about 12 gallons in total. So you don't necessarily use your entire gas tank before you fill up. And that's most people. Yes, there are people that do that because of financial reasons or whatever reasons, so be it. But even those cars, in the long run, electricity is still cheaper than gas per mile. So the benefit of it is cheaper cost of driving. Uh, so people who cannot afford or have the financial capacity to afford gas as readily can afford electricity a lot easier. Um, there are other ways to get free electricity as well too. I'm not going to go there because that's something else to be concerned about, or something else to discuss. But when it comes to efficiency, yes, overall, always aim for the best mileage you can get for any car, the most amount of miles you can get per charge, and the most efficient drivetrain, or the most efficient drive system that you can get per whatever value you can afford. Why? Because in the long run, it's about sustainability. Yes, there are going to be the people that buy vehicles every 2 or 3 years, but the idea is to not necessarily get into those habits again. That's the reason why Tesla doesn't necessarily make a lot of changes to the way their cars look, is because the idea is to sustain these cars for an extended period of time, not necessarily buy another car every 2 or 3 years because something looks different or something looks prettier. No, the idea is to buy one and not necessarily be a carbon footprint hog and buy a car every 2 years and never make it to the point where that car has a better carbon footprint than a gasoline powered car. Range wise, after about 3 to 5 years, most electric cars right now will have a better carbon footprint than a gas powered car. I expect as things get more efficient, that will be cut down to about 3 to 4 years, which means if you keep a car for about 3 or 4 years, you're helping the world better. You're producing less carbon emissions than a car that is a gasoline powered car. So that's the focus, is as we transition over, will it be better? Yes. Do you need to charge your car every single day? No, that's not necessary. It'll actually make batteries worse in the long run. Don't drop it below 25%, 20%, whatever it might be. But if you keep on charging it to 100%, which is unnecessary, well, that's going to make the batteries worse overall, which is not the point. The point is to sustain, make it last as long as possible. So do you kind of do what you normally do with a gasoline-powered car? No. You have to think it through just a little bit better. But can you do almost the same as a gasoline-powered car, where you don't necessarily need to charge your car every day? Yes, of course. If you have a car that gets 500 miles, charge it maybe once a week if that's what you normally do with a gasoline-powered car that gets 500 miles. You're going to be roughly doing the same thing, and it will make the car's battery last longer. Most of the technologies in building a car, the structures and all that, they're going to last long. They're designed to be resilient. They're designed to be more durable than what they used to be. The only thing about it is, how do you manage the efficiency, improve the lifetime of your battery? And as batteries improve in technology, that lifetime will actually be improved even more, which makes the carbon footprint of an electric vehicle so much better here as technology improves. Thank you.